Hello, you are listening to the Gamer Librarian Podcast, the best podcast you can find on this side of the multiverse. I am your host, Adrian, and today I will be talking about Gears of War The Slab by Karen Travis, Deadpool 3, and more. Afterwards, be sure to subscribe to be notified when future episodes are released, and show your support by liking and leaving a comment. Thank you for joining. It's good to be talking to you all again on another lovely Friday, and I have a lot of news to talk to you all about, and I'm excited to share it with you right now. So, I haven't been able to start playing Dragon Age recently because I just haven't picked a way to play either on the 360 or the Xbox One or like buying it on Steam and playing with mods. That just really hasn't been a decision yet made with that, and I'm really geared into playing Persona 3 Reload, and I gotten back into Dave the Diver, which is pretty cool. I got to chapter 4 now. I saved the baby whale, and I do plan to continue playing until I at least get to the Godzilla DLC, which was free. I don't know if it's free now anymore, but it was at one point. I think it might have started to end in August this year. That's the thing that I remember when it was announced in like April or so. But that's what I've been doing, and until I figure out a way to play Dragon Age, I'm really not going to be able to, uh, you know, talk about it or do anything else, and I'm not going to be able to play any, read any books or anything like that. However, on the topic of Dragon Age, there has been new interviews and content related to Veilguard, which I think is pretty good. And they've been talking a lot about how the game works specifically, so that works out pretty well. There's a lot of interesting things. There's the new 700 characters that are you able to talk to, along with the 140,000 dialogue options. That's pretty cool. They seem to be sticking with not a particular set canon, and they seem to be more open to like a personal, more head canon kind of type deal, which is pretty cool considering the books and everything else and the game's choices and all those kind of things. So they might have like a very small thing in the beginning where some major content stuff, like obviously the major choices from Origins and 2, and then obviously just boiled down stuff from Inquisition are going to play into uh, Veilguard. They're not really going to have anything small, like not many small decisions. I don't think your castle, how you made your Inquisition castle, really matters, and that seems pretty important. They don't seem to be also leaning towards knowing everything about the past three games, which I think for opening a new audience 10 years later is also a very good step. That's pretty awesome. Plot threads from the novels and games, while will probably be mentioned in some form, I imagine, they also go into detail that the specific comic, The Missing, I think it's a comic, a character obviously returns. I think it's the Maid's Killer uh, kind of character that we saw from the trailer. That's what I think. I haven't really read anything past like Inquisition's like timeline for Dragon Age. I'm really not caught up with that. So that's what we're doing for the podcast here. And they do mention that they did 5 years of talent casting for the characters of Inquisition, which I think is pretty uh, cool because of the devotion of that. Obviously you want to get characters that meld well together with the, are easy to do with the actors, but like the actors themselves can integrate with the other actors that they talk. I know some like video games, maybe like their actors, like the voice actors, don't talk or ever meet the other actors. It's just always like you just do your lines and that's it. So I imagine that's probably usually the deal, but this seems to be very like close knit, done in house, at least in terms of BioWare and between EA and maybe talent agencies, stuff like that. So they seem to be pretty positive about that. I think the performances have always been pretty good in Dragon Age games, so I'm not really worried about that. I'm also not necessarily worried about the characters neither because these are just new characters, as long as they don't butcher the old characters in specific ways, I don't think that matters. And as long as the new characters are fun and interesting and they feel like they work well in the world and they're characters that are from the world and not like doing weird stuff. I think that's all pretty great. And there's, obviously they're talked about the differences between Veilguard and Dreadwolf in a lot of these cases, and it seems to might take a different approach towards like going back to Mass Effect 2 style, where having your characters be fully present within the story and your choices makes them integral to how the game finishes and ends. And it's more like people call it the suicide run for Mass Effect 2, and that's might be the similar case for the end game kind of mission for Veilguard. I think that's pretty awesome. And yeah, there's just been a lot of cool news about Dragon Age that's coming out that I think is, very specifically important to know for anyone coming in to the new Veilguard coming out who hasn't played any of the new games or anything like that. Like, you don't have to know anything. And obviously, I'll be covering all the games as I play through them including the books and comics, and we'll be going through them together. So you don't really have to go and do that. But I think that you should get Game Pass. You should be able to go and experience the games when you're able to, and that's just my way of thinking. You should be able to play the games, get introduced in your own way, find what you like. But I'm just here to talk about things that I think are cool within these franchises and within these worlds, and find out if you guys like the same thing or you get into them yourselves. I think that playing these games and getting them, sadly the company's more money and more notoriety, talking about it more positively, will get more games here. And I hope to talk about that same way with Veilguard, talk more positively about it in the future. Hopefully the game is good by the time it comes out. Although I do think maybe the gameplay specifically needs a little touch-ups. I don't think they specifically talk about or show anything about magic. And I'm just hoping like they talk about more about like how the gameplay works with the melee characters, not just like the rogue kind of rook class that they had. And that's just it. I really hope that they dive a little more into how specifically new is the gameplay. On the last topic of games, the transition into Gears of War. I'll obviously be playing the Gears of War games sometime after the Dragon Age games are done here, the first three games, and then whenever Veilguard comes out, it'll probably be very close to when I finish all them together, and then we're going to be into Gears of War, and you know, between reading the comics and books for Dragon Age and playing the games, I'm gonna try and do Gears of War stuff and things in between, like the Gears of War books. So I've been reading Gears of War: The Slab by Karen Travis, and I chose The Slab because it's one of the ones in her series that I haven't finished. It was always like pretty understandable what the situation was between these characters by the time Gears of War 1 comes out. Like they have a pretty good opening saying that, Marcus is in prison and he comes out, and by then he's just reintegrated in the military, and then obviously there's some tension, and you don't find anything more about that in bits and pieces of the games until basically Gears of War 3. But The Slab is a prequel novel, and it does kind of flesh out a lot of the more intricate, dynamics that's kind of set up for The Slab. And it's not really crucial, but I do kind of enjoy that kind of storytelling. And Karen Travis is great at delivering those character moments for these characters that live in this world for, they've been here for 40 plus years, and in the games you only meet them at like the very tail end of this long, long struggle for life and like struggle for survival. I think that's really important. That's probably what makes her storytelling really great, I think, for the Gears of War franchise and all of her stuff. And I want to talk about this book because I think it's probably a great starter to anybody just now getting into the Gears of War franchise. I imagine with Gears of War E-Day's announcement, there is so much new fans coming into Gears of War that don't know anything. And for anybody who doesn't know, Gears of War E-Day is obviously a prequel. For anybody who's played the games and knows anything about Gears of War, E-Day is a prequel. E-Day is the time when the Locusts rise up and begin a 14 long year war against humanity. And that's basically a small point in the main story. Obviously it's very crucial, but overall it's pretty small. It's just an event, and it's pretty important to the overall story. And things might not be the same between Gears of War E-Day and what we know from the overall franchise. I really hope that they are the same. I think it should be the same world. It should be the same kind of dynamic. And it's a very scary time for the Gears of War franchise. Like everybody in there, simply because they just came out of like a 100-year long war, the Pendulum Wars, and that was a big war over like emotion lava. That's like lava, but it's like oil. So they use it for like energy and stuff. That's basically what it is. And so after that, they come into this war for survival, and they're losing, and then they're losing humans left and right. And by the time Marcus Phoenix is set up into the story, like for the Gears of War franchise, he's been in jail for. In the slab, you find out it's only about 4 years. I don't know if they specifically go into detail for Gears of War 1 Original or Gears of War Ultimate. I don't know if there's any difference between there, but at least in the slab, he's in there for about 4 years. Not very long out of his 40-year sentence. Not much of a spoiler, but obviously in Gears of War 1, he gets out. So this is a pretty good book. It definitely fleshes out the entire like idea of what it takes for humanity to continue surviving and continue like the idea of morale, motivation, what it means to be alive. Because there's a lot of hard choices that are made within Gears of War in like this military style series, and you don't necessarily see that specifically in maybe the Gears of War games. Maybe I think like the flooding of Jacinto and things like that. That's not a big spoiler. If you play the games, you'll find out what that is. Just don't look up Jacinto or anything. But obviously there's big moments in the game that I think are pretty important and fun and interesting. So you guys should go and play Gears of War, read it, I think if you can, because reading them you get like the best idea of the story. The books are like the earliest prequels for the most part. Some of them are set in between the games, so the game like the books are pretty much written in the idea that you may have an understanding of the games at some point, but do either or. I don't think it's necessarily bad to do either. I think that they both give a really good perspective on not just the world of Sarah, but the inside the characters' heads as well. And Karen Travis is just a mastermind at that. And so, besides reading for her, I've been going back to another author that I love, Stephen King, and my girlfriend's sister got me "You Like It Darker" by Stephen King, and it's a short story collection, 12 stories. And I'm not usually a big fan of short story collections. They're usually like not my thing. I usually like knowing one story what I'm getting into at once, and then just beating it, and, finishing it from start to finish. And then, but sometimes they surprise you. Sometimes there's some small stories that are pretty interesting for what they are. And the first story right now that I'm reading is a Too Talented Bastard. That's what the title is, and it seems like a very faux interperspective idea of like being the son of a writer, and then having like their success be like some kind of dark secret. A lot of people have suggested that Stephen King's like upbringing of being bullied or having nightmares or even like his drug infused like past has influenced his writing, and that's obviously to a degree very important for anybody's backstory and how they influence in their creativity and their content and what they create. That's just a basic understanding of how that works and the background between an artist. So for what it is, I don't know if this Stephen King story is a reflection of him from himself, but it definitely has that kind of tone. And I haven't finished it yet, but it definitely is leading towards some weird mystery kind of thing. It hasn't really gone supernatural yet. It's talking about aliens for the most part. I don't mind it. It's actually pretty fun. So I hope to plan that and talk about it more coming up on the later episodes of the podcast at some point. But besides Stephen King, it's mostly going to be more Gears of War and Dragon Age content, sparingly as I go through the games and do other kind of stuff. And that's basically about it for all of that. So there's also next episode will certainly be a big manga update episode. If anybody doesn't know, I'm a big manga fan. I read things like One Piece, My Hero, Berserk, Dragon Ball, and I'm always on the edge for reading more manga, and I wait day by day for them to release. They release sparingly, and so um, right now we're getting towards the 10th anniversary. I think was around the corner or coming up for My Hero. I'm not necessarily sure, but we're getting the very last chapters for My Hero. I think it's a dual chapter release around August 5th. I think it ends at chapter 430 or so, whatever around there. And I'm excited. They just introduced the like new generation of 1A, Class 1A, which is, kind of cool. So maybe like there'll be seniors in their Shippuden spin-off, if that whatever comes out, or maybe they're just gonna have new sidekicks or something weird. So I don't know, but I am excited for My Hero's ending because as a superhero manga, I think it did a really good job of having its own kind of diverse world and that dynamic between good and evil with these villains. I think that's probably the best way I could say with the My Hero like dynamic that they have because the moments of the My Hero, it's not so much like anybody with powers can be a hero. You definitely need to have like training and be like educated in the art of that. I think Vigilantes is a good contrast to that. Even though I haven't finished it, I think it definitely teeters on that same kind of line. My Hero Vigilantes is like a spin-off comic by the same author, I believe, but it's also pretty good. I do like the series itself. So in the future, we'll probably be finishing and catching up on that whenever My Hero ends. So definitely, I'm very excited for that. And so I do think My Hero, as of like a superhero manga itself, it very much delivers in that front, regardless of what you think of the character specifically. It does have like, those memes and like Deku crying is like a big thing. I keep hearing say like Deku crying a lot. It's like a big thing. Like Naruto cries half the time. It's just like fine. I don't know. And then One Piece is something that's always out week by week, usually on Sunday. Sometimes they take hiatuses, but I think now the manga is uh, being caught up by the anime, and so maybe we'll get some hiatus for the anime or something. But the One Piece manga is also getting some really good traction with these new information. And like, if you guys have not caught up on My Hero or One Piece, I certainly think you should because it's been a fun time. And so, obviously, the newer mangas like Wild Strawberry are going pretty strong, and we're still waiting on things like Berserk, Black Clover, and Dragon Ball Super to come back. And I'm thinking of maybe doing a poll or a vote or something to see what other manga might you guys want me to read, not just like My Hero Vigilantes, but something like JoJo's or Hunter x Hunter. I haven't really gotten into those very much, but I would definitely like to give them a deeper try for the podcast specifically. So, maybe at some point we'll get along with that. Let me know down in the comments if that seems like a good idea. And right now, I think it's about time we talk about the Deadpool and Wolverine movie, only because this is about the last thing I want to talk about for the podcast. I have mixed feelings about this movie. I super enjoyed watching it. I think it was actually really entertaining. It's certainly the best Deadpool live action movie, and Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, I think, just kills it. That kind of addition is great. That's probably maybe as best I can say for the movie. It's a Deadpool movie, so if you like the first two Deadpool movies, it's basically the same. However, I think for a movie that is supposed to encompass a pretty good legacy, and they do a good job of respecting that legacy, although I don't think that obviously maybe not fully giving us what we want with these movies becoming part of the series and all that kind of stuff. Like, who really knows what's going to happen? Because things like the Daredevil show haven't even been shown off yet, but they referenced Daredevil here in this movie. He's referenced a decent bit. There's all kinds of stuff like that. But so they bought the rights from these movies back, and they can have these actors back to reprise roles that they haven't done in literal years, which I think is pretty awesome. To a degree that having them back is pretty cool. For just this movie is nice. Maybe overarching, I don't think it would be too much of a stretch to maybe have them return. That's something. But I think even in terms of this movie specifically being a part of the Fox universe of movies, the Wolverine of this movie is pretty lacking. The movie really hits on the idea that you've seen the Hugh Jackman X-Men movies, like you already have an idea of what Wolverine is. They talk about him being this great hero and all kinds of stuff, and they even showcase scenes from the original X-Men movie specifically, even the older ones from the 2000s, not just the newer ones that are from like Days of Future Past or Apocalypse or anything like that. You know, I don't even think they have a animated show reference in terms of this movie. I'm not even sure how that really connects. Maybe it does. They have quite a bit of cool references. I think my favorite reference that they have is when Deadpool is looking for Wolverines and that he finds a Wolverine tied up on the cross of all the mutant skulls and things like that. It was very like a comic book cover reference. I like that. That was kind of funny. And Deadpool is obviously a fourth wall breaking kind of character. The fourth wall breaks are there. It's very much a movie of like, haha, we made this movie's only made because of like a lawsuit and all that kind of stuff. It's very funny, but like it doesn't really feel like it's a MCU movie that's like tied in here besides like the time people. Like the time force or whatever they are with like Loki stuff. You don't even like see Loki referenced here. It's just kind of, you know, assumed it's part of the TVA or whatever it is. And yeah, it's just Wolverine is not very much like, I think the same weird disconnect that Wolverine has for this movie and like not having anything to go off of with like the original um, X-Men movies or even like Laura Kinney's returning for X-23, like even that relationship is kind of like already not there because this Logan doesn't have that with her. So that this is you don't have that in this movie, which is I think is pretty kind of mid, especially because Logan is like a pretty awesome movie. It's probably the best Wolverine movie next to all of them. It's the best one. So I think the same parallel you can draw there is with the villain of this movie, Cassandra. I think it's Cassandra Cain, the psychic sister of Professor Xavier, and part of her story is very much connected to Professor Xavier, and he's not represented in the movie in a way that makes her feel important. So the best way they can have that kind of resolution be meaningful with any of the other characters is a small bit with Logan and her being like, oh, if Charles was here, he would not be abide by this or anything. And I don't know, I don't know if Cassandra Cain was the right kind of villain that they should have had for this movie. I don't really know like anything about Deadpool villain specifically, but I was kind of thinking by the time I saw her, maybe she's not the real villain. Maybe like villain would be like a version of Charles Xavier, like Onslaught kind of weird stuff. Like maybe it'll just come out of Wolverine's head. Because I don't know, it was just kind of very weird to have her as acting like the main villain, and it's kind of a villain with like the TVA to a degree, but that's like always the case with them. They're like this new faction. But yeah, they don't, you know, necessarily feel like this movie. They don't make us feel like this movie is super like the Fox stuff is now being part of the MCU, which are like, well, now Deadpool and Wolverine are, I guess, now here, and that's practically it. That's probably all we got for the most part. I don't know. Timelines is weird. Multiverse stuff is weird, and making these movies takes a long time. So who's to say what's going to happen? However, we do have some weirder news. Not only was like footage shown or stuff for the new Fantastic Four movie, which confirms it's set in the 60s and stuff at Comic Con and stuff like that. But they even have Robert Downey Jr. returning to the Marvel Cinematic Universe as Doctor Doom, which is a crazy, crazy turn of twist announcement for this series. Having this, it's not the first time I think actors are returning to reprise these new roles. Like um, the guy who plays Captain America obviously used to be Johnny Storm from the Fantastic Four movies earlier. So there's a weird, obviously, lineup with that. Everybody should go watch Deadpool and Wolverine. But there is a weird connect now that Robert Downey Jr. is playing Doctor Doom to a degree because he was Iron Man for such a long time and he's getting like $80 million just to be Doctor Doom. And that's awesome. He's a great actor. I think he could probably do a really good job as Doctor Doom. I don't much care for who plays who. I think that almost anybody can play any role as long as you're true to not only like the character, but like to how the story is written and like if the writer is really good at writing characters and it's got to be really good dialogue with that. Acting goes into a lot more than just remembering lines and then doing a performance. Like there's obviously it's got to work within the world of the world that the thing is written in and a whole bunch of other stuff. But that's pretty cool to have that character, the actor returning as a new character, which is fun. And we have a whole lot of other MCU stuff like the Falcon Captain America 4 movie Brave New World, which is crazy. I think that's probably the only thing that we have announced. There's like Agatha, which I won't even watch. I don't know. And also, there's no real connect between the shows and the MCU, like the Disney shows and all that kind of stuff, like Moon Knight and all those things. At least right now, there's no real connect. It's no real telling how they're gonna connect. I think maybe Thunderbolts. I kind of feel like Moon Knight might show up in Thunderbolts, but then there's like obviously this Captain America movie is just gonna be the sequel to the Captain America TV show. That's pretty much a guaranteed. But I don't know. It feels like these things aren't connected, and the end credit scene for this movie just proves that we don't need those anymore sitting in the theater for these long because it was just them confirming an inside joke or a lie from within the movie. Like that's all the end credit scene was. It wasn't really that like important to watch, which I think is not good. I think that kind of sucks because that kind of leaves us unconfirmed with how Deadpool is gonna return in any other movie or even Wolverine, like where are their cameos gonna be? Who like that, that's what I'm saying, like that's the beauty of the MCU for like the first three phases was knowing that like there's going to actually be like a connected thing with these other things and being like, oh, I guess we'll just wait 20 years for Deadpool to, show up in an Avengers movie or something stupid like that. Who knows? We got two more Avengers movies. There's the Doomsday and then or is Secret Wars and then I think that's it, right? Doomsday and Secret Wars. They rechanged it because it's not Kang. So yeah, Kang's done. So he was like a very mid, small villain. Didn't even get a time to be in the spotlight, bro. That's crazy. Thanks, Jonathan Majors. So that was a whole thing. So that ripped to that, and I liked it. It was definitely a fun movie. It could have been worse. It could have been like Thor, where it just felt utterly useless as a superhero movie. But overall, I did like Deadpool and Wolverine. It felt like more of a love letter to Wolverine as a character, which is awesome in a way. It just kind of feels like, hey, this is now like us acknowledging the legacy of Wolverine, and now here he is just doing his thing. So it kind of draws a very similar parallel to like Laura Kinney joining the 616 universe for people who like read the comics. Big fan of her. And she's in this movie, which is awesome. But then there's a cool parallel to that for at least Wolverine, I think, to joining the MCU, which I hope they do later on in the MCU movies or TV shows, whatever. But Deadpool just kind of feels like his story really didn't matter here. Obviously, it was just like him trying to prove he's a good guy himself and using Logan as like uh, a tool or like a thing to live through with that because Logan's more of a hero, but then he doesn't get a Wolverine that is a hero in the movie. He gets like a very lackluster failure of a Wolverine to a degree. You know, you don't really necessarily find out why or anything like that, but that's what it is. I think it's a decent movie. I would definitely put it top with any Deadpool movie, and it's pretty justifiable as a good MCU style movie. So I would put it with just about as good as like Avengers or anything like that. I think it's good as like Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, things like that. I really enjoyed it. So I'm really looking forward to what could come out next for the MCU and things like Gears of War and Dragon Age. And so if anybody here likes what I talked about here, like, subscribe, and tell me what other games and books I should talk about in the future. Thank you, and see you next time.